Welcome, Puyaka Puyaka. I'm your host, Tijani Musa, and I have a very exciting episode today. And this is going to be any topic, any subject is on the table, and we are going to discuss anything from Black empowerment to what is happening in our country today, to what is happening with youth, to developing an organization, and just having the vision to empower the youth of the community. And so, to help me discuss this open topic, open subject, I have invited my guest, Dr. Stephen Graves, who is an assistant professor and director of undergraduate studies for the Department of Black Studies at the University of Missouri. He received his PhD in political science from Howard University, HU.
You do it, you know.
Yes, sir. And from Howard University in Washington, D.C., Dr. Stephen has been involved in the community as the founder of Troublesome Movement, a nonprofit organization that focuses on community outreach and providing educational and professional services to minorities and underprivileged groups. Dr. Graves is also the author of A Crisis of Leadership and the Role of Citizens in Black America, Leaders of the New School, a theoretical examination of the concepts of citizenship, citizen, and leadership in the United States. Dr. Graves is a highly sought after speaker and mentor who has led professional development workshops and lecture at numerous colleges across the country, high schools, and institutions. And so I am very honored and I'm very, very grateful that you have decided to bless us with your grace. Welcome to La Verdad Duele.
Man, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to it, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Before we get started, I want the listeners, the viewers, whoever get the opportunity to listen to this podcast, I want them to know who you are. Can you tell us your story?
Yes, sir. So again, I'm originally from Portland, Oregon, where I went to high school, two older brothers, from a single parent household there. And I ended up going to college, play a little college football at University of Puget Sound. But academics, I knew was really going to be my calling card. So I dedicated myself to getting a PhD. I knew I always wanted to be a college professor. And I was always interested in African-American history, African-American studies, studying Black people. When you go to predominantly white high schools, predominantly white colleges, you're kind of yearning for, some education about yourself and about your community and about your peoples. And so when I finally got the chance to go to Howard to get my PhD at a HBCU, I got that immersion in Black culture. And finally, I didn't have to have the arguments with white people, about the founding fathers over and over again. I was able to leave that and talk more about race. And so that was just a blessing experience. Outside of that, again, I started my nonprofit organization, Troublesome. I really wanted to find another way to get some outreach and do things that I could have a more impactful way directly, with my community and everything else it is. I've been out here at the University of Missouri probably about 4 years now, after the protests here in 2016. And so I've just been, working away in the Department of Black Studies, trying to grow our department, trying to educate the youth, be involved, try to spread Black history, spread African-American history, and across the African diaspora. So it's just truly just been a blessing, man, of just being, really determined and just focused, and being passionate, man, about the goals and things that I want to accomplish in this life that I get blessed to have. So it's just been my entire life dedicated to just, work and pushing it, man. And so I've just been blessed for sure with the opportunities that I've been given. And I've just tried to make the most out of every single opportunity that I've been given for sure.
Wow, that's amazing. And you mentioned that you grew up in a single family household. Who inspired you to go to the level of obtaining a PhD? Because growing up in that kind of household, number one, the opportunities are very limited. Most of the time, statistically, people are saying when you are in that situation, it is even harder for you to graduate high school, let alone you went to a PhD level and you were able to obtain your doctorate. How in the world were you able to pull that off?
First, I was blessed, with a mother who just stressed hard work and, people aren't going to hand you anything, don't try to depend or rely on anybody else. Work ethic is what's going to really make you and what's really going to drive you. So, When I was early in high school, I was a typical high school kid, thought I was going to be a football star and go to college and be some great athlete and everything else it was. But in 1998, my mother got sick with MS. And so at that point, I really knew that responsibility was going to be on me to really try to make the best life for myself and best life for my family as well. So from 1998 on, man, I kicked it into high gear. I got straight A's, on a roll 2 years in a row, enough to boost my GPA, enough to go to college. And then when I went to college, I really thought I was going to go to law school. I thought that, being a lawyer was going to be the best way for me to make impact in my community, everything else it is. And man, I got to the first day of freshman orientation for the pre-law program, and that room was just packed full of people, all freshmen, because it was freshman orientation. So all freshmen, just packed full of people. I could barely find a seat. Man, I got there in the back and I saw those people, and I just said to myself, if all these people are doing it, I'm not doing it. There's got to be a better way. So I left. And then the first day of classes, man, I had a political theory class with a professor who ended up being my mentor and advisor, named Arpad Kadarke, who was a Hungarian guy with a thick accent. And he just walked around class and just chewed on his glasses and just pointed at students and said, you talk, now you go, now you go. And I said, man, I can do that. I said, boom, that's it. I can do that, man. This is what I can do for sure. Like education, college professor, the hours aren't that bad. Whatever it takes to be a college professor, man, I'm going to do that. I can really reach people through the classroom and what I teach and the kind of discussion and how I interact with students. So he really showed me, a different way. I had never thought about being a teacher or a college professor until I got into that class. And then from there on, man, it was just, like you said, the odds are against us, a Black person, young Black male at that age, going to college, going to predominantly white institutions. The odds are obviously usually stacked up against us. But again, my mother always just stressed hard work, man, and just grind it out. She worked 2 jobs, for most of her career and for most of her time. So I knew that it was going to be about work ethic and sure will. So, I went to University of Nevada for for 2 years, but when I got there, man, I didn't have a place to live. I didn't have a job or anything else there. So I was homeless for the first 6 months of grad school at University of Nevada. My stepfather had given me a van to sleep in and everything else it is. And so, I parked that thing right across the street from campus, and I lived in my van for the first 6 months of grad school, just eating 7-Eleven hot dogs every single day and, staying in the library till it closes and they kick me out and everything else it is, to make it happen. I just knew I had to do something, man. And I suffered a whole bunch. Life wasn't easy. After that homeless experience, I really started to feel, for lack of better words, I really started to feel invisible, man. I felt like if I could make it through being homeless for 6 months in the winter, around kids who are, it's Nevada, so they're at the casinos every single night, and they're walking by my van in the middle of the night, and I'm scared, and everything else is kind of going on. So I knew if I could survive that, man, I could do anything. I just knew it. I had my Bible in my car. I had all my books that I needed. I had plenty of time for just introspection and just deep reflection, man. I really got to get a deep sense of who I was. So then once I started figuring out who I was, the homeless stint really taught me, what I was capable of. Man, if I could survive this, man, I can do anything. You know what I'm saying? I'm out here in the freezing cold, eating big bite hot dogs, $1.22 a day, putting all the toppings on them things so I could survive through the meal and get through it and everything else it was. There's a couple other things that I'm not too fond of, but I had to do to survive and eat and everything else it was. But I just knew if I survived this, man, I could survive anything. But no, I just realized that after that, man, that I could do anything. And it just gave me the tools of know thyself. And part of knowing thyself is knowing what you can handle, what you're capable of, what your will is, how hard you're willing to work for stuff. And I knew that I was going to outwork anybody. And I was just going to just grind it out. There was nothing that anybody was going to say to me. I was past being taunted. All those things were out the window. I was a full grown, ready monster at that point. And that's just the best way I could describe it, man. Like I really had to work hard to kind of create some kind of, mental and emotional balance, because, you can get real angry and get real dark real fast when you're homeless and not eating much and you're surrounded by wealthy students, you're surrounded by prosperity and wealth all around you in the casinos and stuff, man. And so you can really go to a dark place. So I really had to just, dig deep in self to kind of create some balance there, man, so that I could still feel like I had what it takes to be a good person in the community, or else it was, but still be hard and grind it out enough to meet my goals. And I haven't quit since, man. Like I use my hashtag, it's a lifestyle. I just adopted this way of life full-fledged, man. And now there's just no turning back.
That is insane. What was what was one thing that kept you going? Like, where do you get the motivation to keep pushing after being homeless and seeing all the things around you? How did you pick yourself up? What was that thing that you be like, this is what keeps me going? You mentioned the Bible and everything.
I cried a lot, man. That's for sure. I mean, like I said, it gets rough. And I definitely have some deep, dark thoughts, occasionally, which I think all people do when you're suffering and everything else it is, But I definitely rely on the Bible a whole bunch. There are passages you just taught me that suffering is just part of the process. Suffering can be a blessing if it gets you to the next end. And so I really focused on those things, man. Like all the suffering I was going through, I just knew it was going to come out on the other end, man. I had just so much faith that knowing that if I could just withstand this suffering, if I got through to the other end, man, I was just going to, I knew if I got to the other end that it was going to be a blessing and some goodness waiting for the end of the tunnel for me. So what really got me through was, and my family, of course, being back home, always inspired me. I called my mom a couple of times crying, like, I'm done. I want to go home. Send me a ticket. I'm ready to get out of here. And she was just like, let's get this. If you can just get to the end of the semester and see how you make it. If you want to come home when classes are done, then I understand, but get to the end of the semester. So she definitely encouraged me to stick it out and hold it out to the end of the semester, which I did. Just my faith and family, was really the key that got me through those times for sure.
That's amazing. And so being an African-American professor, what is that look? What is that like? There aren't that many African-American professors where I am, like in the Virginia area. What is it like being in the classroom as an African-American, well-accomplished professor?
It's a double-edged sword, a lot. We don't have a lot of Black professors here either, and we don't have a lot of Black students. And obviously I'm in Black studies, so we really try to focus, a lot on teaching Black and white students, like our history and things that they don't get in high school. Not a lot of kids get African-American history in their high schools. And if they do, it's 1 month out of the year. It's Civil Rights Movement, MLK, Obama, that's it. And so it's really a balance, the white kids and, my professors and white people in general, they always look at Black professors sometimes as token hires. Oh, this big diversity push. So they had to find a Black guy to, come here to, make it seem like we're not so racist and everything else it is. And so there's always those eyes on you thinking that you don't belong here. You're a token hire, you're a diversity hire. And that's always part of it. Plus, when you do research in Black studies and on Black issues as well, a lot of white professors don't think there's much value to it. Oh, what's the value of teaching people about Blackness and Black empowerment and everything else? How do you write books on that? Oh, that doesn't really contribute much to society. I'm a scientist over here. I'm doing groundbreaking work trying to solve diseases, and you're talking about Black history. Oh, that's not all that important. So there's some of that goes on too, on the professor side, on the kind of institutional side of things, as far as just the value of Blackness and value about teaching Blackness. So you get those eyes about being symbolic token hire stuff as well from faculty and from some administrators. That's definitely part of it. The white students are the same. You'll get the ones who are really interested in it and they'll take it to heart. Some of the white students, of course, just take it as a diversity requirement. They're not all that interested in all that much. They're taking it because they have to, or it's a requirement. And so, you really have to kind of work hard with those students as well. And in this day's age, some of them take the classes just to be agitators. They want to ask tough questions and see what you really think and want to dig at you and see why it's all important. So you get some pushback from white students, and sometimes you can hear their comments in the back. Oh, why we got to learn about this? Why we got to take this? Oh, this is something. When am I ever going to need this type of a thing? So you definitely get a lot of that. With the Black students too, it can go both ways. There's a lot of Black students who think, oh, because I'm Black and I'm in Black studies, oh, this is a piece of cake. This is gonna be easy. Oh, I know all this stuff already. There's really not, I should ace this easily. This is no problem. And it's a Black professor too. Oh man, this is easy. Oh, no problem. So you get those students, and then as Black professors, man, like we're gatekeepers to knowledge, but we're also mentors and stuff as well. And so we don't want Black students just to take the classes and think they're going to get an easy A and just to move on. Like we really want the Black students, especially and particularly, to learn about this stuff, for reals. So, the onus and the kind of hard work that we require sometimes for them seems to be a little imbalanced or unjustified. But we're really interested in making sure that Black students know about their history and stuff too as well. So when you get the ones who think that they know it all already, or oh, my dad taught me about Malcolm X, I'm really okay, or I know all about this stuff already, I'm just here to brush up, and the rest it is. They can sometimes be, a barrier to you as well in dealing with those. But the most important ones, though, are the Black students who are there because they want to be there. They love it. They've been looking for this stuff their entire life. They didn't get much of this in high school. So now they're really want to go deep and learn all kind of things. And that's where we really try to hang our hats on, man. That's where we make our money at, is on those students who are really ready to just dive deep into it. But again, doesn't come without its disadvantages. Again, being a Black professor here at Mizzou, our service requirements, the things that we do. So when Black things happen on campus, or there's a Black incident, so there's a Black event, they're always calling Black studies first. Hey, can you guys do this? Hey, can you guys do that? Things that white professors don't have to deal with, because there's so many of them, and there's so many different organizations and everything else it is. But when there's a Black event or incident involving Black people, it's always Black studies, and they're always calling us for service things like that, Same with like newspapers and the local news and local media, of course. Here, something Black happens, boom, Black studies. What's you guys' opinion, stuff like that. So we get called into action on a lot of things that kind of take away from the research and teaching side. It's like we're always to be the voice when every time something Black happens. Here they come calling for us to give our perspective and stuff. So that can get pressing and tiring sometimes too, man. But it's good work. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I knew what I was signing up for, man. Especially being at a PWI in Missouri, a kind of red state in the urban areas, rural areas too, in some instances. So I knew what I was signing up for, man, for sure. But I wasn't swayed, and it was what I was called to do, and what I wanted to do. So to have the opportunity to teach Black studies, at a research institution like Mizzou, was perfect. And I just roll with the punches, man. White students, Black students, I teach them all the same way. That there is an emphasis too, and an importance of teaching white students and stuff as well, so that when they get back to their dorms or they go back to their small towns, they go back to their parents, they're a little bit more informed. Maybe they check their uncle on some racist things that they say, or maybe they check the roommate once in a while, tell them what they're believing isn't necessarily accurate. And so it's really a balanced act, man, for sure. But we're here to teach everybody, man. But there's definitely some pitfalls of being a Black professor at these institutions.
What would you say to a young girl or boy growing up wanting to be in education and looking at you and wanting to be a professor one day? What would you tell them?
Outwork everybody. Life is not about a popularity contest, man. The difference that's going to make you stand out from anybody else is going to be your work ethic and what you produce, the thing that you put out. It's not easy depending on where you go to college. Even at white institutions or Black institutions, you're going to face adversity. Make sure that you're well-read and that you have ideas. Have your own ideas and have your own thoughts, and then research those and make sure that you're sound on those things that they can never take away from you. And then be ready to be active on those things and put that stuff to work. But stick to your guns. If there's something that you're really in depth knowledge of, stand by it and don't be swayed by teachers who don't think that that's going to work. Professors or other students who think that's not a really good paper, that's not really a good idea. You can't really learn that. What are you going to do after college with that? You can't be swayed by any of that stuff. Just to really dig in deep into their own, empowered knowledge and what they can accomplish. And really focused on that. But there's some suffering along the way. There's going to be some name calling along the way. There's going to be adversity along the way, especially if you're trying to be a Black person doing Black education or doing Black things. Being a Black student in some places like business or some other major can definitely have its different advantages and disadvantages. But with trying to do Black things, you got to have thick skin, and you got to just be prepared to take whatever shots that people are going to send your way, because they will come. There is some suffering involved. There's some name calling involved. There's some being dismissed involved. But if you just really believe in what your plan is and you're devoted and dedicated to it, then just, hold on tight, man, because, the winds of desperation and despair and the dark side can definitely come blowing your way. But hold on tight, because at the other end, man, there is positivity and there is goodness and greatness waiting for you at the other end. So I always tell students, pick what you want to be dedicated and master in. And once you find out what that thing is, then give it 110%. Just go all in, just go all out, strong-willed, never take no for an answer. Outwork everybody and anybody, what I'm saying? When they're sleeping, you're working. When they're working, you're also working type of a mentality, So one thing about being a Black person in these professions, man, as you get going, is you have to do twice as, the work, sometimes just to get half as much as credit, So when that's the outlook going in, and you have to outwork everybody, hang your hat on that. Hang your hat on your work ethic and being a disciplined worker.
Wow. Let's expand on that a little bit. Why is it that Black people always have to work twice as hard to get sometimes half the credit or just to be at the same playing field. What kind of encouragement do you give to young people coming up?
Why do we have to work twice as hard? Man, the institutions are built against us, one, and they're not built for us. We talk about government, you talk about politics, you're talking about the economic systems. These things were built upon the premise of white sustainability, white empowerment, and white protections. The police force, all these institutions are really bent to maintain whiteness. So when you come through one being Black, you have those odds against you already. So they don't think that we can contribute much. They've been taught their entire lives that Black people are inferior, they're educationally inferior, they're academically inferior. And so the idea that token hires, symbolic hires in all industries, as the world kind of turns on race and diversity, people don't think that your work is ever going to be good enough. You're just here because they have to hire you. Those things really can take their toll on Black people, especially in the work environment. Yeah, we got to work twice as hard because the institutions and stuff are not built for us. And we don't own really at the administrative executive side to make the decisions. There's always, whites or some other ethnic group making decisions over us. So in order for us then to compete, they want to see us work twice as hard. If we don't get the benefit of the doubt, we don't get, uncles or aunts or colleagues who can give us the little wink in the gun to get us hired. We don't have a lot of people in those positions that we can look up to as mentors. So what's required of us when we can't just make a call to an uncle or a cousin or a dad know somebody, and we can't just shoot out emails to people, else it is, or former colleagues who have openings and everything else it is. The onus is on us to work and outwork and to produce and overproduce and everything else it is. The odds are, when I say, are just stacked against us in those things. So yeah, we have to do twice as much work. And sometimes we still don't even get the full credit. You know what I'm saying? It's, it got approved, or else it is. They're trying to create diversity and we're trying to be inclusive. So yeah, let that guy in, or yes, your sales are pretty good, or else it is, but they could always be better type of a thing, So we're never going to get the credit. The thing I tell Black students and everything else is about that having to work. It's not about the credit, man. You're never going to get the credit. If you're in an industry or business looking for credit, especially credit from other people, outside groups, white folks, man, you're barking up the wrong tree. That's not what we get into this profession for. That's not really what you should do anything work-wise for. We don't necessarily work for the credit. We don't work for credit from white folks, especially. Do it because it's what you care about and what you're passionate about, and because you can make change. And if you're into one of those professions, or you're in one of those careers, or you see yourself as a leader that's looking to inspire change, that's what we're in for. You're not going to get the much of the credit. If you're the bigger the change you're trying to make, really the less kind of credit and a kind of, esteem, fame type of sense you're really going to get, because really to make drastic change, you have to shake things up, shake people out of their, the status quo, make people uncomfortable. You're never going to get fame and fortune or get acclamation for shaking people up and bringing them out of their comfort zone. You know what I'm saying? People want to be comfortable and they want to hear comfortable things. That's what they're going to buy, read, listen to. So if you're out there trying to shake things up and make drastic changes, or else it is, the credit's not really going to come your way the way that you want. So you have to be self-motivating, self-inspiring. And also, man, you got to be able to pat yourself on the own back. You're not going to get a bunch of good jobs, data boys, way to get it done type of emails. You're not going to get a whole bunch of that crap. There's not going to be people looking to give you credit for anything. So you got to be self-motivating. You got to be able to empower yourself, pat yourself on the back, celebrate with yourself. You know what I'm saying? You have to be able to do so, because they're not going to get a whole lot of that, even from colleagues, from other students, from other people, not at all. You have to be able to satisfy yourself in that instance. I'm proud of the work that I did. I don't give a crap if anyone else believes it or likes it. I feel confident in it, and that's good enough for me. And I leave it at that. Sometimes I don't even go back and read works and things that I publish and go back. I'm satisfied with it. I know what I put out there. I'm confident in what I put out there. What people say about it and what people attitude is about the work, that's on them. And I can't really control that. The thing really is for me is that my ideas get out there with that I want them to. And that's really what matters. And so for students, it should be the same way. You're not going to get a bunch of Instagram followers and likes if you're out there trying to change the world in a very empowering, revolutionary, radical way. So you have to be able to, go home and celebrate with yourself. Whatever it is, whatever movie or whatever, thing you like to drink or sip on, or whoever it is that you like to celebrate, man, pat yourself on the back and be willing to. Congratulate yourself, because they're not going to be beating on your door to give you, awards and congratulations. So do it as long as you're doing things for the right reasons and you're working hard. That's the ticket. That's really the key to this.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask you about the courses that you teach at the university.
Indeed.
And I'm going to ask you a question about those courses. I want you to respond. The question is, what do you expect a student that walks into that class to take away from each of the classes that I'm going to talk to you about?
Okay.
The first one is the Black Studies 1000, Introduction to Black Studies.
We expect students to get a crash course in African history, African American history, Black culture, literature, music, politics, sexuality. It's just a really brief, we hit on all those topics for a few weeks at a time. You don't really go too in depth for an extended period of time on one topic. But that's a crash course in Black Studies. That's a crash course in where Black Studies came from, the origin of the discipline, why it's important, and the things that we talk about, the things that you're going to hear about in other courses down the road. It's really just an introduction course to give students a really good crash course, college level crash course into all things Black and the formation of Black Studies and why it's important and the kind of traditions and concepts that come with it.
All right. And then Black Studies 1704, Introduction to Black Politics.
Oh, this is all about the Black people and how we get involved in politics, political parties, African institutions, the politics in Africa, the kind of political culture in Africa as well. But then we also talk again in African American politics, Black people's relationship with government, which is very, very important, especially again, 2020 election stuff coming up, how Black people get involved in voting, the kind of political parties that we back, our political ideas, what things that we vote for, things that we're passionate about on the political side of things, how the founding fathers thought of Black people. It's really there to give people, again, a really good in-depth perspective about Black people and government and the relationship with government, whether it be African or in the United States.
Black Studies 2425, Race and the American Story.
That class is just all about race in America. We start with the founding fathers, and and we do the readings directly from the founding fathers, thing that they said, and we just walk through history about how race in this country really developed from the founding fathers on through Reconstruction, all through civil rights movement and into current literature, music, and into politics at the Obama there. And that class is really discussion based. Students have very short readings, and we focus on having a discussion. That is a very discussion based class where students get short readings, and most of the class is spent on talking about the issues that were discussed in those readings and the different perspectives and following the kind of evolution of race in this country from 1776 into the current times.
Black Studies 2704, African Political Thought.
African political thought is all about continental Africa and the political philosophies that derive from there, from Pan-Africanism to Nkrumahism, scientific socialism. We really get into the kind of cultural impacts, pre-colonial Africa, pre-colonial African behavior, voting and democratic and political systems, government styles, and the philosophies that came from there, from Kwame Nkrumah to Toure, and to Garveyism and all of the above. We really focus on the way that Africans see themselves philosophically, politically, before colonialism and after colonialism, and the ideas that Black people actually came up with themselves, not so much Europeanism models and the European philosophy. We're trying to get into Black African, continental African thoughts, concepts, and traditions that are continental African based, and we focus all the political philosophies on continental Africa.
Black Studies 2975, Traditions and Concepts in Black Studies.
This class is important to really get into the different kind of methods and the different kind of studies that go on in Black Studies. So whether it be from history, politics, literature, arts and culture, gender and sexuality, we get a little bit more in depth in these things so that students can have a really grasp on the different ways that you can study Black Studies. So if 1000 is kind of intro level and 2975, we really try to get a little bit more in depth about these are the different kind of fields in Black Studies. These are the important concepts and themes that you'll want to know when you're talking about Black Studies. And this is the type of research that you can kind of do in Black Studies.
And then the last course is Black Studies 3977, Black Studies Methodologies.
We teach students how to write Black studies, how to do research that focuses with Afrocentricity and Black people at the center, how to do studies on Black people in a proper way that is justified and empowering to the African experience. And too many times when you get research done on Black people, it's always negative. It's always, on a cultural negative type of way. And so we try to teach students how to do research, how to look up sources, how to write papers and books, and have paradigms and have frameworks that are Black, Afrocentric, that can be used to study us, that can be used to write about us and research about us that are Afrocentric focused, that prepare students for grad school, prepare students for writing a master's thesis or a thesis at the undergrad level, if they really want to work on and research in Black areas. And there's a certain valid way of going about it. And so we really focus on teaching students how to write and how to research, Black studies and to write papers on Blackness.
All right. So amazing. So I want to hear your take on this. Of all the things that are going on in America today, in terms of the Black experience, the Black Lives Matter movement, the suffering that young Black people are going through, the harassment that young boys, Black boys are going through in America. Do you think that the African American, someone like you, having a connection back to Africa, how do you see Africa playing a role into solving these issues?
I think Africa can actually play, a pretty big role in helping these issues. I think one, by having open arms, and I know that I went to the 400-year return in Ghana last summer, having open arms to African Americans, offering ways for African Americans to get there and have that experience and to return there and to see it for themselves, for sure. And so just to be embraced back home will just go a long way. So that's definitely one way. I think an empowered Africa can go a long way along the world, and for African Americans to kind of have an idea that the European way, the American way, isn't always the best way, isn't always the right way, and may not be the right way for us. So as things start growing and building, and you see independence being done in a lot of African countries, they start to grow themselves, the idea of Pan-Africanism and the African Union, to see the African states get on one accord and be empowered, would go a long way in showing African Americans, look, we can go someplace else. We don't actually need to be here. We don't actually have to stay here in America. Sometimes these white folks get real funky, and they say, oh, if you don't like it here, go home. At some cases for African Americans, we should have the opportunity to say, you know what, we will get, this shit ain't for us, excuse my language. You know what, it's not for us. Maybe we do need to go somewhere else and experience somewhere else. And there will be no better place for us to go than back to Africa. Africa is a self-sustaining continent, man. They don't need anybody for nothing. They have all the natural resources that they could possibly ever need, which is why colonialism is what it is, which is why European countries rape and pillage African countries, because those European countries really don't have much as far as natural resources go. So they steal from natural resource-rich countries like Africans and African countries. So the idea of an empowered African continent just goes a long way of dispelling the myth that a lot of these Black kids have been taught, and white kids too, but especially the Black ones. Oh, you came from huts. Oh, there's nothing civilized over there. Oh, they're backwards over there still. Oh, do they even have Wi-Fi over there? These are things that we actually hear in 2020 over here in the United States that people still think is going on in Africa. And I've been there and it's like, no, there's everything you've got in these big cities in the United States, they have in Africa too. There's skyscrapers in downtown areas and bars and cars and Wi-Fi. What the mean are you talking about? This, different things. And so breaking that barrier down and giving African Americans the opportunity to experience those things will go a long way in dispelling the myths and the stereotypes that they get bombarded with from white Americans here about what Africa is, about what Africa was, and what Africa can be. And so you give African Americans the chance to witness that and experience that, then the next time white folks get funky about go somewhere else, and we're empowered enough and have the ability to say, we will. And there's a place that we can go where we'll be welcomed with open arms, where people look like us, where people understand us and understand our plight. And there's some common ancestry there, and some common shared history and experience there that we can go to. So I think that we're talking about Africa, man, I always just think about a unified Africa. That's always the first thing that I go back to, the teaching of Garvey and Du Bois and the Pan-African movement and Nkrumah and others, man, about a united Africa and across the diaspora, across South America and the Latin American countries and the Caribbean, Afro-Europeans, Afro-Latins, and African Americans. An empowered Africa is the one thing that this world is not prepared for. And a united Africa is the one thing that Europeans are most afraid of. And I think that an empowered Africa is the one thing that can go the furthest way to giving African Americans, and particularly, a better understanding about where they come from, and a better understanding about what they're capable of, and a better understanding about of their homeland. And it opens the doors. Every person I talk to who's ever been to Africa has always said, you know what, I can move here. You know what, and actually, I'm considering it, and I'm thinking it. And boy, it's not what they told me it was. It's not what I thought it was. I love it, and I feel embraced here. That goes a
Yeah,
long way.
there's a huge movement that's happening right now when a lot of African American are moving to Africa. Actually, they're moving to Ghana, the
Yeah.
Gambia, they're
Uh-huh.
moving to Senegal. So
Nigeria.
Nigeria, the notion that Africa is so backwards, there are rooms for improvement, but the ideas of like PayPal, Cash App, Venmo already started in Africa,
Yeah.
in Rwanda, in Sierra Leone. They had these things before the United States actually hopped on it.
Absolutely. But if you let the white man tell you, oh, we've never contributed anything. Oh, you ain't never done anything over there. And anything they have over there is of the blessing of the European introduction to them and everything else. It is like, no, no, no. That's why in our classes, we talk a lot about pre-colonial Africa. Man, we've been doing this for a long time, and much longer than the European. Before there was the European, there was the African. And we were a civilized nation with roads and streetlights and everything you guys are talking about way before you guys even came into existence. So this idea of a backwards African and uncivilized people and everything else that is just, again, the European myth for which we're constantly trying to tear down to this day. And again, we have those conversations now when you hear them, oh, they have Wi-Fi over there? Oh, where'd you stay? And like, no, 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 no. Those things are just myths that are used to keep this perception of Africa as a backwards, uncivilized place when that can't be further from the truth. There are places in Africa more civilized than many of the states in the South in America, for crying out loud.
Yes,
you go
sir.
to some of these places in some of these states, Russell, they're third world countries. Their education is third world level, and else it is. You can get much better education in North Korea than you can get in some of these states in America. But you let the white man tell it, oh, America is just great through and through, and everything else it is. It's the African that's backwards. Man, they couldn't be more wrong. And again, I think white people use that as a defense mechanism for their own misery.
Let's transition to the shirt that you're wearing. You have the shirt Troublesome, and you are the founder of Troublesome Movement, which
Absolutely.
The goal is to transform leaders in the communities, and you also do it by serving society's most pressing needs with innovation and revolutionary ideas aimed at the common good in your community. Yeah. Tell us about the Troublesome Movement.
Man, we just believe in innovation, revolutionary ideas. You know, we're anti-status quo. That's why we call ourselves troublesome. Because if you're a fan of the status quo, if you think the current world that we're living in is ideal and you're comfortable in it, then you're going to find us very distressing and troublesome. And hence the name and everything else it is. You know, so many times in this society, and what keeps this country where it is just because the values and the character and the mental mind frame of Americans is just so debased. And it's devolving and getting worse and worse over time. And so when we talk about mediocrity and the status quo, that is one of the biggest inhibitors to empowerment and to our communities. People become dependent and reliable on others for things that they can do themselves. And so when we look to empower people to make the best versions of themselves as individuals, and stress that in our communities, the best people then make better communities. And those communities is where we're going to get the most improvement done. And when I get involved in politics and this person in politics and everything else it is, people start to think that the biggest change in our country and amongst our people, amongst the Black people, takes place every 2, 4, 6 years with elections. When you can't just be further from the truth. You can make the biggest impact in your community on a day-to-day basis right there at home in your community. Reading to your kids, helping your kids with their homework, having family time, joining PTAs, going bowling leagues, things like that. That is community-based change that takes place every single day. We shouldn't be putting all our eggs in a political basket every 2, 4 years and think, oh, only time I can make change at the voting booth. No, you can make change at home right now here today. And so giving people the tools and the knowledge and the empowering mind frame to accept that as a role is what we focus on. That's really at the crux of what we try to do, is give people those tools to be self-empowered so that they can see themselves as being active members in their own community and less dependent on others and less dependent on government to be their savior when we can save ourselves. As a Black person, the government has never been instilled to work for us. The economic system has never been built to work for us. And so why we put all of our eggs in that basket then when it's not really built for us? All of our frustration and all of our anger sometimes comes from these systems, institutions, when they don't advocate or they don't produce for Black people? Well, it wasn't meant to. So thus we have to be able and prepared to do for ourselves, and thus we can then ask for and depend on the government for less and less and less. So the programs that we try to promote, the mind frame and the philosophy that we instill in our volunteers and in our members is one of revolutionary knowledge and intellectual virtue first. But we're here to change and empower communities, man, by really focusing on empowering the individual, giving each individual the tools and the resources that they need to be the best version of themselves, and then keep that same momentum and empowerment in their communities and give them the things that they need to empower their children, empower the people in their community, that these communities can be the best that they can possibly be.
Wow. And how did you feel when you actually started that nonprofit organization in your community? How do you feel about that, accomplishing that?
Outside of getting my PhD, it's really been the most important thing that I've really accomplished. Again, I was looking for a way to make immediate change right there in my community, the best way that I knew how to, without being under the kind of umbrella of academia or be under the umbrella of some government office or anything else it is. I wanted to have my own thing and my own way that I could tailor to my own personal philosophy, which I firmly believe in. Like I said, it's a lifestyle, living on an every single day basis. So the best way that I feel like I could transfer that without the oversight and being constantly monitored was through my own organization. So outside getting my PhD, and that definitely has been my number one, calling card, and one of the things that I'm most proud about. It just gave me an opportunity to have direct change outside of my profession, without the kind of barriers of my profession, to talk and walk and to build the kind of programs and express the kind of ideas that I felt the most about. Because again, they're not so much status quo. A lot of the ideas we're talking about change is not going to be, are not so conducive to the current conditions and the status quo. Everybody putting their eggs in the voting basket and everything else it is. The way you see economics and capitalism and the way you view family and everything else it is. We believe in those things, but our philosophy about those things is much different than the norm. Hence we call, it's somewhat, people call it radical. We believe in revolutionary knowledge and revolutionary activism, because we're looking for wide sweeping changes here. We're not looking for an oil change and a tire rotation, man. We're talking widespread grasping change is what we're asking for. In order to do that, it's going to take, a strong will and ideas. We're idea generators, man. We believe in using our intellectual abilities to come up with good ideas that people aren't thinking of, and different ideas to attack the same problems like homelessness and education and everything else it is. We want to supply those radical and revolutionary and innovative ideas in order to really attack at the status quo and make real drastic, empowering changes.
That's amazing. And so you mentioned grassroots changes, daily changes, not just waiting for 2 years, 4 years, and 6 years elections. Having those grassroots changes that are happening in the communities are the most effective ways in doing those kind of changes. That being said, why do you think that having an organization like yours is important in the communities?
Because it's not attached to government, and it's not attached to the Eurocentric norms, and it's not dominated and controlled by white people. And a lot of these instances and a lot of these organizations and a lot of big businesses, even if they're Black owned, or even if they have Black presidents and executives, are founded upon and directed by whites who control the means of production and who thus they'll control the information. So having a Black owned organization that's not attached to whiteness, that's not attached to Eurocentric norms, that is based on and based in our own communities. It's important for Black students and for young Black people to see that. And two, it's important for Black adults and for people that we serve to see people who look like them serving them, to see people who look like them providing them with the resources, to see people who look like them in professions and careers and in occupations that they're unexposed to, unaware of, and have little access to. So it's really about providing an image and providing a resource for African Americans, for Black people across the diaspora, really to see themselves and to be served by people who look like them, and to have that opportunity to interact with people who look like them that they may not normally come into interaction with.
So a lot of people have problems. The fact that you think this way, like you're passionate about the African experience, you're passionate about Black experience. And some people think in dichotomy, in the idea that if you're so passionate about African experience, Black experience, then you must be hating on white people. What would you say to them?
We don't hate white people. We don't have time to hate white people.
Right.
Hating white, there's no time for that. Anytime spent wasting on hating white people is time spent wasted that you could be putting that energy into your own communities. Let's not waste our energy and waste our time having unnecessary battles with white people. That is not to say that we will not come into conflict and come into direct confrontation with whites on certain issues, but that is not our focus and that is not the aim. Our aim is on Black people, the center. Too many times with other areas of organizations and other areas of business, and even other areas in academia, like anti-racism, it always centers white people first and then talks about the Black experience around that. Well, we're more interested in putting the Black experience in the middle first, and everything else that happens around that then comes next. But so when we're talking about what we say, but with white people, or else it is, listen, we also don't see our job is not to teach white people about now how to be racist. It's not our job to educate white people about why they hate us and dislike us and don't want to work with us. That's not our job. Let white people solve that problem out. We have our own set of issues and own set of problems that we need to work out internally amongst ourselves without white people's 2 cents on ways that the Black community can become a better community. Let us figure out our own way to be a better community without their input, and that's the best way that we can get somewhere. White people don't have to be involved in everything that's Black, nor do we need their input or their suggestions or their ideas. No, we've got our own suggestions, we've got our own ideas, and we can do it ourselves. And so having to separate ourselves from whites is not meant to be divisive. It's not an issue of hatred. We don't necessarily dislike white people, hate white people. We love white people just like we would love anybody else. But we have our own thing going here, okay? And we need to do our own thing. And we have our own ideas. And we don't need your 2 cents. And we don't need your input or suggestions. We're going to solve our own problems in our own way, using our own methods and our own strategies. And if that just will happen to make white people uncomfortable because they're used to being in positions of power and they're used to being in positions where they can dictate the terms to Blacks, well, of course, that's going to make them uncomfortable. They're used to being empowered and having say over Black people, else it is. The second we take that power back and empower ourselves, of course, it's going to make white people uncomfortable. But that is not our job to exercise and to massage white people's feelings and their emotions. That is not our job. We're not their educators and we're not their counselors. If they're so powerful and so supreme, then they can figure it out for themselves, and they can figure out amongst themselves how to treat Black people with respect and how not to be racist and how to have some kind of form of discipline in yourselves and your morals and your character. That's not our job to teach about white people that. And so take that amongst themselves and see the idea of Black people separating and wanting to do our own things and have our own power. It's not a slight against white people. It has nothing to do with white people. Everything that a Black person does in this country is not always related to or associated with whiteness or white people. We have our own ideas and our own things, and our own cultural way of going about it. It's not always some reflection on whiteness. See, that's what happens when you put white people at the center. Then they think every discussion then is some way about them or towards them or to educate them. No. We're not interested in that. You do that amongst yourselves and let Black people do our own thing.
All right. Let me get your comment on the book that you have publications as well. You have written a book on Amazon. People can find it there. A theoretical examination of the concepts of the citizenship and leadership, a crisis of leadership and the role of citizens in Black America, leaders of the new school. Basically, in this book, which examines educational attainment, participation in the criminal justice system, and health and family structure in America, what would you say is the takeaway from this book if somebody were to read it?
The conditions of Black people have not gotten better since the 1970s. In economics, in education, in health, and in crime. There has been little to very little to none leeway or progress in comparison to whites and to other organizations or other ethnic groups in this country. So what is the big difference? Prior to 1970, we had Black leaders in Black communities. Malcolm, Martin, Garvey, Black Panther Party, Huey, Stokely Carmichael, and others. We had Black leaders who were built on servant leadership. That's why the book is really about Black communities and leadership. Why we need leaders in this post-1970s era. Post-1970s, the Black leader was introduced to the white schools and everything else is, capitalism started to take over, and the leaders then became more about themselves, became more about individuals and not so much about the communities. Who are the leaders now? Rich people who have a lot of resources or who are movie stars or vice versa. Where before the leaders used to be, there are teachers, our parents, a pastor, people who are active in the community. And since the conditions in this country for Black people have not gotten better because we have horrible, terrible leadership. The leadership of Black Americans since 1970 has gotten so bad that the progress is not coming. And why are we getting progress? Because the leaders have failed us. There's no one else out there who will stick their neck out, be the voice, and be courageous for Black Americans in this country today for the things that we need. So it's really at the end of that book is all about for young people, for people who think they're leaders, who are want to be leaders. What's it going to take to be a leader of Black people in this day? It's really trying to provide those tools, knowledge, innovation, courage, discipline, balance. Those are the kind of things that book tries to focus. Conditions for Black people haven't gotten better. They haven't gotten bad, terrible leadership. If you want to be a leader of Black people today, here's the things that you should really look into. And this is the kind of, elements of the kind of characteristics that you should be having.
Wow. All right. So in that line of thought, what is that something that is right around the corner that our leaders are not considering in the advancement of Black people in these United States?
Separatism and Black-owned organizations, man. I think one of the things that's really escaped Black people since 1970s really is integration and assimilation. Black people don't have to integrate into all these white institutions. I heard a great quote once about, segregation is being told where we can't go. Separatism is choosing where the hell we want to go and having the power to go wherever we want to go. And those are two different things. So a lot of times you talk about having Black schools or Black banks or Black movie theaters, people tend to think that, what are you, anti-white, or you're into segregation? We had that before. Like, no. We can still go to white stores if we would like to, but we want to have the ability to and the privilege of going to Black ones. And so many times our current leadership is all about integrating into these white institutions when they should be focusing their energies on building Black institutions instead. Black-owned institutions with a Black cultural Afrocentric experience at the center, and let that be what we should be building. We don't need to necessarily build and integrate into all these other things that are owned by other groups the rest of this. Instead of trying to integrate into their institutions, build our own institutions, more Black schools that have Black principals and Black superintendents and Black nurses and Black counselors, and build institution centers of medicine where you have Black doctors, Black nurses, Black surgeons, and everything else it is. And these Black banks that can then loan and lend mortgages to Black people and everything else. That's not saying that we won't go to Bank of America or Wells Fargo. The ability is that we want to have choices. And we deserve to have choices. And at least one of those choices should be of an organization or a person who looks like us. They don't always have to look like someone else or be led by someone else. So even if the banker is Black, but the bank itself is owned by whites, that's not the same thing. So the idea about the biggest area of where our leadership has really failed us is that they have concentrated too much energy and too much time on integration and assimilation and not enough time into building strong Black-owned and Black-built institutions, Black PACs and political organizations, and stuff like that. Why is it always about integrating into the existing parties or trying to integrate with existing banks and integrate with existing businesses? Have our own stuff in our own areas, because that's where power comes from. Then we can negotiate and we can interact with white people from a position of strength, from, hey, I can shop here or I can't. You either treat me right, get the hell out of here and I shop somewhere else. Hey, you either give me proper terms of banking and more, or you know what? I don't need this. I can go somewhere else. But as of now, all we have is one white bank after another, or one white institution after another, and they hold a similar kind of monopolistic line of thought about how they treat Black customers. So it doesn't matter if you go to Bank of America or Wells Fargo or Chase, any other ones. They all have the same mindset going in. So you're not really getting a difference of customer base or a different customer service experience by going to all these different white institutions. So the goal thus then is to create Black ones, right? Where people can see and can experience people who look like them, who are then helping them. And if white people want to shop at Black banks or want to shop at Black stores, absolutely fine by us. But give us the choice and the options. Right now, we don't have any. It's Walmart or bust. It's Wells Fargo, Bank of America or bust. And so we need to focus our energies, and the leadership needs to focus its energies on creating Black institutions that can sustain and protect and can build and improve upon Black communities.
All right. I want you to comment on the notion that defund the police. we live in the United States of America. We have
Right.
enough resources to take care of good police officers and train them the right way to do community policing. And then we
Absolutely.
also have enough resources, because we always say that we are the best in the world,
Oh
to
yeah.
take care of our communities. So if we have those things, for people that says defund the police and fund Black futures, what is your comment on that?
I couldn't agree with them more. Yeah, one thing we're talking about the police force and these police budgets that I always question is, are you trying to prevent crime, or are you trying to get better at stop at once the crime has already happened, post-crime? Because if you're talking about defund the police, we're talking about they don't need the highest technology. They don't necessarily need armored cars and everybody in Teflon, titanium armored suits and the best guns and the best weapons. For what purpose? To stop crimes that's already being committed. Well, what we should be spending money on is preventing crime in the first place. And how can we do that? Better education, better economic resources in those communities, right? Counseling, better mental health and therapy and therapeutic and counseling centers in these places. Let's prevent crime before it happens. Let's not just get better and better at stopping crimes once they're in the midst of happening. Let's spend that money on preventing crime in the first place. So when people say, "Oh, defund the police," they want to take your police away. That's not what we're talking about. See, that's just another example about how the white mindset just automatically turns things and flips it into this mystery of, oh, they want to take the cops out and they don't want the cops anymore, everything else is. That's not even what we're talking about. That's not even what defund the police means. Defund means take those resources and spend them better. Of course, we still want to have police officers, and there are good cops out there that we need and should be patrolling the streets for sure. But they don't need budgets that are bigger than the education in those cities and those states where else it is, where the cops get paid more than teachers do and everything else it is. Absolutely not. And yes, they need to go through better training and everything else is about how to deal with members in their community. One way that solved that problem, that was for community policing, like you mentioned. There should be residency requirements for some of these communities as far as being police. People who police these neighborhoods should live in those neighborhoods. That is going to be the best way, where the policeman that you interact with lives in that same community as you do. His wife shops at the store there, his kids in the same little league. You see that guy walking down the street all the time. That's Officer Joe. Yep. And when Officer Joe then has a conflict in that community, he's more likely to understand the people there, or know the people there, and thus then that relationship will be better. You got white guys coming from 4 counties over to police Black neighborhoods, thinking they're doing some civic duty to themselves, and come home to their wife like, oh, I've just patrolled the meanest streets from 4 counties over. They have no investment in those neighborhoods. They don't care about the people in those communities. They don't even know the people in those communities and everything else it is. So when you're talking, defining the police, part of that too is about community policing and having people from those communities actually policing those communities. And that goes a long way in defunding and redistributing those resources as well. Instead of paying cops to come 5 counties over, when we can have people right there in that community policing those things and train them and give them the resources that they need to be improved, that could go a long way. So this whole idea of taking police out of neighborhoods and cities is just ridiculous. That's not what we mean by defund the police. We want to take those resources and get into crime prevention, not into crime stopping.
All right. So I want you to comment on your recent publication, the one that talks about Black nationalism and the presidency of Donald Trump.
Okay.
What's your takeaway from that?
If Black people have learned nothing else from President Trump and everything else it is, it's the idea of there's no better time for us to do our own thing, man. There is no better time than right now for Black people to be like, you know what? We need to do our own thing and build our own stuff, man, which is one of the main tenets of Black nationalism. Self-empowering, Black determination, be able to define ourselves, be able to determine our own fates and our own definitions the way that we like. And if Trump has taught us anything else, and what he has brought out more than anything else from whites, poor rural whites, and even some wealthier middle class whites, is that they are not going to support Black empowerment and the things that Black people need in order to improve ourselves in this country. Thus, there is no better time than right now to dive deeper into and get more comfortable and more involved with Black nationalistic thinking, and to be ready and willing to do our own thing, like I said, with Black organizations to take care of ourselves, because Trump and the people who support Trump are not interested in helping Black lives. We have seen this now. We've experienced it in a plethora of ways. They're not interested in improving and helping Black lives. And if we can't count on them to do it, then we have to do it ourselves. And that is at the root of kind of Black nationalistic thought and theory. And so I think that Trump has done a good job of shedding his light on the cold soul of white America. And now that Black people know what white people are capable of, they know what they endorse, what they're proud of, what they see in Trump, what they applaud that Trump does. Seeing that, we now know, we should now be aware of that and know that we got to do our own thing. They're not going to help us. there's nothing that we can do to make them help us. There is no magic elixir out there that's going to make white people treat black people better and to change their hearts and their feelings about how they treat black people. That's not going to happen. That's never going to happen. So we should then focus our energies on other things that we can control, things that can empower ourselves. And so I think that the whole idea of Trump and black nationalism is he really just sheds some light on why black people need our own things and need to do our own stuff, because they are not for us and they're not here to help us.
All right. So not only are you the founder of Troublesome Movement, you also have a podcast. It's called It's All Gravy. ITZ All Gravy, GRAVY. It's a play on words on your last name. Tell us about your podcast.
Man, it's just, I was getting sick and tired of getting in Facebook jail, man. Like last year, I was probably in Facebook jail 8 months out of the year. 8 months out of the year, I was in Facebook jail. For sometimes I would only be out of Facebook jail for 3 days before I was thrown back in Facebook jail. And most of that mainly came from angry, whites who reported me for things that I pointed out about their own racist ignorance and delusion in this country. And they would report me and I would end up in Facebook jail and I would appease it, and Facebook would always uphold. Meanwhile, white folks would call me the N-word and threaten me to shoot me and hang me stuff all the time. And Facebook would never do anything about it. So I needed somewhere else. I needed a platform else to this. And I've always been big on philosophy. I've always had my own little philosophy framework and ideas that I express on my website and everything else it is. And so this podcast was going to be the best way for me to get my raw, uncut ideas and philosophies out there that are from my website, but be able to expound upon those and apply those to current events, whether it's sports, music, politics, just culture. And so it's called It's All Gravy because it's really just about all my ideas and all my thoughts. And I don't want to be anyone else to feel like I'm talking about them or blaming them or these ideas come from somewhere else. Like when you ask about the ideas expressed on this show, you can point your finger at the one guy. His name is in the title. You don't have to ask around. These are all of his thoughts and his opinions. And I try to just give them to you, raw and rare and as radical as they are. But I call it It's All Gravy. It's just an opportunity for me to just espouse my ideas on current events, things you may not necessarily hear from the mass media, things that aren't normally said. And I hold some positions that are not so status quo, and that whites and sometimes blacks don't necessarily always agree with, but they deserve to be heard. And I use my podcast to espouse those ideas on a plethora of different topics and concepts.
Definitely. I have gotten it raw, unedited, uncensored. Everything you've shared with me is amazing. And I hope that people can check out the It's All Gravy and also are able to find you with the Troublesome Movement, which is www.troublesomemovement.com, or they can send you an email to the email sgravies@troublesomemovement.com, or they can look up your organization online. It's on Facebook. They should also be able to find your podcast everywhere that they listen to a podcast. Is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you think the listeners or the viewers of this episode are going to like to hear from you?
Will, again, like I talked about before, outwork everybody. Strength of will is the most important thing. I always ask myself and I always ask my students, how hard are you willing to work for the thing that you have? So I just stress each person to get out there to use knowledge as power, intellectual virtue for its own sake, being smart and knowledgeable for your own sake to empower yourself. We try to really stress that with Troublesome again as well. I would just encourage everybody again to visit the website. We have some great merchandise, some apparel on there, obviously. Make a donation. Also, if you're just into the more philosophical side of things, they can visit my website, www.gravyology.com, for more philosophical aspects. I get into some of my own teachings and some of my own knowledge there. But we're all about just knowledge and just empowering, self-empowering. No one's going to give you anything. We just believe in just hard work and just grinding it out and being strong enough and bold enough and courageous enough to run through brick walls if we have to for the things that we care about and the things that we're most passionate about. And if every person individually does that, then the community overall will succeed and be successful.
All right. So usually at the end of the episode, I would ask my guests to read a letter that they wrote to their younger self. But because we didn't give you enough time to write that letter, I'm going to ask you a question. If you were a superhero and you can only change one thing in this world, and you doing that thing, changing that specific thing, you would succeed at it, what would that thing be?
Oh man, that's a good question. The one thing, if I was a superhero that I would go out and change, I would say capitalism and the economy and the distribution of wealth and everything is around here. I think too many times our values and our morality comes through money. And we see money as the new God, and the good people are those who are rich, and the bad people are those who are poor, and the good people are, and the ones who are going to heaven are those who are prosperous, and the evil people are those who are poor and live in poor communities and everything else like that. So I think a lot of this stuff with racism, yes, Black people and white people aren't going to, have different histories and cultures, but there's a deep economic root to a lot of this ignorance and racism and hatred that takes place. So I think that one thing that I would empower, that the way that wealth is emphasized and dispersed, would definitely be the one thing that if I was a superhero that I would snap my fingers and flip right now if I could.
All right. And then the last question for you is, what are you grateful for in 2020?
Oh, 2020, I'm grateful for the knowledge that I've accumulated over time. I'm grateful for, my family, obviously, who continue to support me. But most of all, man, I'm grateful for just that I have this time to just dig deeper into my own self and become a better person. A lot of times people feel like they don't have time to do this. I don't have time for a podcast. I don't have time to write a blog. I don't have time to read. Well, now we've been blessed with that time. And a lot of us are working at home now and haven't, been back in the classroom or been back to our offices in months. Things have closed down a whole lot. There's literally been giving no excuse why you haven't been able to empower yourself or get better at one thing, one skill, one trade, one hobby, anything with this time. So just really, blessed with the gift of time in 2020 is really the thing that I'm most happy about, that I've been most blessed with. Just blessed with the time to really just have better chance for introspection and to work on projects and to really, look about the kind of person I am and who I want to be and make kind of changes. And so that's really the most important thing. A lot of people have suffered and gone through a whole lot with COVID in 2020, and that's definitely something that I feel bad about for sure. But people can also use this time to benefit to themselves and to become better versions of themselves. And that so in 2020, I've definitely have been blessed with all the time to really become a better person and better version of myself for sure.
Dr. Graves, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us about the Black experience in America and how the African continent can also play a role in pushing the movement forward. I appreciate everything that you've shared today and definitely enjoyed this episode. And thank you for all that you're doing for your students and for the communities.
Thank you. I appreciate it, man. Anytime.